This is the Spokane Soccer Show, and I've never been more happy to be your host, Benji Wade. On today's show, the USL Super League era has begun under a blue supermoon. The Gonzaga women started their season by giving up 2 goals to 2 Utes. And the Premier League is back, and Newcastle won their game despite an egregious red card. Eddie Howe's shithousing Magpies really seem to be back. We're going to sign Gahey or Chalaba or Chiesa. We probably need another fullback if we sell Trippier. But joining me to serve up only the best vibes about all things soccer in the fine city of Spokane, Washington, it's my friend and professional soccer player and current college soccer coach, Abby Carcio. Welcome back to the show, Abby.
Thank you, Benji. I am so excited to be here, especially because we've had our first game day. We have so much to get into. I am thrilled.
And you're probably already wondering, because you're looking across your screen and seeing that I'm drinking coffee and going, what the hell? It can mean only one thing, though. It just means there's a lot of soccer to talk about.
So much soccer to talk about.
Let's get started. How are things with Roger Williams College? University? College. University. College.
I mean, they're one and the same. Like if you were to say college overseas, people would be like, what? You have to say university, but it's Roger Williams University. Things are great. We are in full swing for preseason, double days for the girls. I can confidently say coaching is exhausting. There are a lot of things that you don't understand as a player. And I felt as though I was pretty attentive as a player to what coaches were doing. And the time commitment is something I got wrong in that assessment, but I'm loving it. I have a great group of girls. I'm just full steam ahead soccer from sun up to sundown.
Abby is coaching right now. You are head coaching right now because
the head coach of the university is actually on maternity leave. So I am thrown into the deep end. This is my first real coaching job, I would say, and I am calling all the shots. So it is a huge learning curve, but I have a great support system around me, supporting me through this, and I'm learning on the fly. So I love it. It's something different, and it's exciting.
And you currently have which of your coaching licenses?
I have my UEFA B in 2 weeks. Hopefully I pass. I do
Don't fail that test.
Pass. I've done all my assignments. I do feel like I'm going to pass, but I should be qualified officially in 2 weeks with my UEFA B coaching license.
That's awesome. I'm so excited for you. So then you will have a UEFA B coaching license. You yourself are a professional soccer player rehabilitating a torn ACL that you suffered in early April. I thought it was an April Fool's joke. Turns out it was no joke whatsoever. It was a big bummer, but you're recovering. You're doing okay. How's the rehab going?
Yeah, so the rehab has been integrated into my coaching. So I'm on the pitch every day, obviously. I have my boots on and I have been doing a few demonstrations, which I don't know if my surgeon would be happy about that, but I feel
I'm not happy to hear that.
No, like I'm in that 4-month mark, so I am allowed to do these things. I am taking precaution, but it feels good just to strike a ball, even if it's a 10-yard pass. So I'm getting there, working hard in the gym, trying to get my strength, and hopefully we'll be playing a little bit more in the coming months.
So mini passes.
Sure. For the podcast.
Mini strikes.
Mini passes, some, inside the foot volleys, things like that.
Okay. I injured when I was a sophomore in high school. Playing for my high school soccer team, shout out, Palmer Moose in Palmer, Alaska. Early season training, went out, and I can't believe how miserable a lesson this was that I learned at that age. I hurt my groin pretty bad. And a groin injury in soccer is deadly because you can't kick a ball.
You can't.
And I couldn't strike a ball with any force whatsoever for like a month. I was 15. What the hell?
First off, I didn't even know you had soccer in Alaska. And that might be that might be naive of me to say, but that image in my brain didn't come forefront. But yeah, definitely injuries suck, and groin is definitely an integral part in football. So I feel for that 15-year-old self, but you learned your lesson, and hopefully you didn't hurt it again.
Correct. I definitely did learn my lesson. I also learned that I tried to take aspirin for it. I was such an idiot, and I did not have a lot of help from parents. This is a whole story. We're not going to get into this. But the reason we have soccer in Alaska and so many wonderful sports is because from about May until August or September, the sun basically doesn't go down, Abby. So We get it all in, and the soccer season is wild. Okay, we're going to move on. I've got a few housekeeping things. You can probably tell, Abby, because you've been wondering, I know you've been wondering, why is Benji wearing this hat? Well, I can tell you why. The Spokane Soccer Show has a new sponsor and a signature beer. Abby, do you drink beer ever?
I am a teetotaler.
Fair. Okay.
Through, but I'm so happy these companies are supporting your podcast, Benji. That is amazing.
It's a family connection. I think some people who know me know that. So what is Wildland Co-op? That's what you can see on my head. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're not, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Me and Abby put a lot of time into doing this podcast with a video that goes with it, which includes film and some clips and stuff like that. So get on YouTube and watch this. That's the hat I'm wearing. What is Wildland Co-op? Well, it's a farm. It's a brewery. It's a winery. It's a local market. It's a bird. It's a plane. Okay. It's all those things. It's my sister and brother-in-law, Vanessa and Michael. They're up on Green Bluff and North Spokane. If you know, you know. And there's going to be so much more to announce about this. But Michael and I did hatch the idea of a signature beer. Michael really got into brewing beer. This is a whole thing. We'll talk about it. I'll have him come on the podcast and describe what he's into. I've teased this whole thing on Instagram. We made a beer together because of the connection with Flat Stick Pub, our presenting sponsor. It's called the Double Pivot Pub Ale. And you are going to be able to drink it soon at Flat Stick, or you can buy a can of it up at Wildland's Tasting Room on Green Bluff. There's some can art, all kinds of things. That's it for now. Much more news about our partnership with Wildland Co-op and the Double Pivot Pub Ale soon. Okay, one more quick note. Please take a moment and subscribe to this podcast, whether that's YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're on Spotify, hit the subscribe button, or I think they call it follow. If you're on iTunes, Apple Podcast, whatever they're calling it these days, wherever you get your podcasts, like if you follow or subscribe, it makes a really big difference. And also, new update, if you would like to support this show, we have added a donation link to the website. We're also working on merchandise. I'm going to order some more hats. I'm working on designs for a t-shirt. And yes, Abby's been wondering this. It's on the tip of her tongue. A Spokane Soccer Show custom kit. Yes, that is in the works. So please go to SpokaneSoccerShow.com. You can donate to support the show, and you can watch for merchandise drops because that's all happening. Okay, unless Abby has something to plug. Abby, do you have anything to plug?
I just want one of those kits.
You're getting one. Of course. Stop it. All right. So Abby has nothing to plug. Let's get on to talking soccer. All right. Abby, I have a question for you. And I forgot to tell you that I was going to ask you this question. But when you were first following the Spokane Soccer Show and you saw how much time and attention I was paying to the Gonzaga women's soccer team last fall, did you ever watch any of the clips or maybe catch a game on the internets through ESPN or anything like that? Do you know anything about that team from last year? You don't have to.
I know, and Sydney Cummings, who is a Zephyr player, will reiterate this. I know very little about the college game.
That's right. I did know this.
It is a bizarre thing. I spend most of my time watching professional football. And so, Benji, I saw some of the clips, never watched a game.
Okay. You're going to have to suffer through just a modicum of highlights from this game, but I have a question that I'm going to throw at you.
Fair.
So Gonzaga travels to Salt Lake City for their first game against University of Utah. They lose 2-1 to the Utah Utes. I made a joke about the Utes. Couldn't help myself. If you've seen My Cousin Vinny, you know, go watch the clip. We don't have time to get into that. They conceded early to a looping half volley thing that just went over the head of Lauren Town. She could really do nothing about it. It was one of those weirdly placed shots. I was actually really impressed. It was their center forward who did it, so she definitely meant to do it. Gonzaga really struggled to hold on to the ball. They did end up equalizing off of a set piece in the second half. Shout out Marissa Garcia, who sent in a cross to Caitlin Rigg, center forward, who came on as a substitute. Bullet header, just wonderful, exactly what you want to see. I mean, it wasn't far from the keeper, but Caitlin, dude, definition of bullet header. She smashed this thing past the keeper. So it was 1-1. They really competed hard in the second half. And then a crazy thing happened, Abby. 89th minute. And as we all know in college soccer, because you played college soccer, even though you don't watch it now, it has a countdown thing. There's no added time. There's a clock. And it hits 90, you're done, dude. That's it, right? So in the 89th minute, 88 and maybe 15 seconds or something, Chelsea Lee, midfielder, plays the 6, great player, plays the pivot. She's probably maybe a yard and a half outside the box, right?
Okay.
And a player from Utah smashes the ball going for goal. It's like Chelsea's trailing arm. You can't, Abby can see what I'm doing here, but if you're not watching this on YouTube, which you should be, it's below, it's not above her head. It's not down here. It's down here. Her trailing arm, it strikes her trailing arm like that at an angle, like at a 30-degree angle. And the ref blows his freaking whistle. Okay. I have a note on this because they added a new rule in the Premier League this season, and it already has happened. Manchester City against Chelsea yesterday. Chelsea defender sends the ball, or an attacker sends the ball into, I think it was Kovacic, his arm, which was above his head. But it was so close that they have a new rule. They're not going to call the ones that are so close that the defender can't really get out of the way. But it's supposed to be if your arm's in an unnatural position. Never mind the Chelsea and Manchester City example, but this seemed deeply unfair. Anyway, this kid, Bella Woods, finesses around the wall. I mean, it looked a lot like anybody who's followed the podcast since the beginning. Gianna Riley's goal against Pepperdine and her hat trick that secured the WCC championship last year. She had a free kick that was very, very similar. Super heartbreaking. Anyway, what do you think of that whole thing? And from how as I described it, and I realize I cheated here because you didn't see this, but thoughts on that whole, like, your arm's not even in an unnatural position and just strikes you from like 3 yards out.
I think a lot of talk in the professional game, and I think also in the college game, about this unnatural position. From what I've heard, and I was a referee from 12 to 15, so I am the person to ask about anything to do with refereeing.
Okay, yes, you are. You're an expert, really, I think, is what that means.
Deep knowledge on this.
3 years as a teenager means, yeah, you're the first call they make.
100%. I should have been at the World Cup actually this year.
Yep.
However, jokes aside, I've heard that it's in the frame of body. And so if your arm is outside of your silhouette, like if it's extended in any way, that is a handball. Okay,
Abby, I just don't understand it. Do you run with your arms plastered to your side, or do you run with them tied behind your back?
I do have a qualm with defenders who purposefully put their arms behind their back because I think it diminishes mobility.
So dumb.
However, like, you should be running hip to chip is what we say, like hip to chip.
Cool. So Raheem Sterling is just a walking handball magnet. Any player who just naturally has their arms out a little bit is in trouble. I totally reject this premise.
I mean, I think you wouldn't be alone in this. However, I don't know. It's a tough one for me to say otherwise.
Somebody told me about this. I didn't see this interview, but somebody was talking about, and I apologize whoever it was that told me about this just recently, about how Cannavaro and Maldini, who were saying they feel really fortunate that they played in the era that they did, because that type of handball penalty was never called, and they didn't have to feel this compulsion to run or to position their bodies unnaturally or to do the like hands tied behind the back run, which I hate seeing it. I can't stand it.
I think there's a fair point that they're making, because I guess you have to go back to the origins of what the handball is really about. Like, handling is probably the number one thing we're concerned about, like intentionally batting something down.
Sure.
So I get it from both sides. As an attacker, I want it to be called. As a defender, I don't want it to be called. So it's difficult from a player's line.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, well, back to the game. It finished 2-1 because there was literally 30 seconds left in the game after this kid buries this goal. So shout out Bella Woods, unbelievable finish, and a tough start for the Zags, but they competed really well in the second half. And this will be a work in progress and a modified rebuild for Gonzaga women's team. In case you went into a deep hibernation since last winter, this is what's transpired since then. Gianna Riley, Kelsey Euler, Grace Corder, Kaya Lee, Maddie Kemp, Kate Doyle, and Shelby Roon all left. They're all gone. 5 to 6 of those players were going to be nailed on starters. 2 of them were just announced to the Herman Trophy watch list. If you don't know what the Herman Trophy is, it's basically the Heisman Trophy of college soccer. And Gianna and Kelsey are on that list. Like, they lost a lot from that team that made that historic run last year. So be patient, Zags fans. Let's get behind Coach Benz. Let's get behind this team as they work things out. Be sure to turn up Sunday, August 25th. Noon at Luger Field when they host Kansas State. Speaking of Coach Katie Benz, I did get to see her and the Gonzaga team at the game on Saturday. So we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to serve up the main course for today's podcast, Zephyr FC's first ever game as a professional women's soccer team. The Spokane Soccer Show is supported by Spokane City Credit Union. Are you a customer at a big dumb bank? Well, stop it. At a bank, you're just a customer. At a credit union, you're a member and a shareholder. You can help make decisions about what the credit union does do or doesn't do. Banks just want to get bigger by swallowing up smaller banks one at a time until there's only one or two banks left. Nobody wants that. Well, except for big banks. Since 1934, Spokane City Credit Union has remained independent, relevant, and local, with a focus on the financial needs of individuals and families in Spokane City. Go to sccu.net, Spokane City Credit Union, serving Spokane one member at a time. Okay, we're back. You did it, Spokane. You sold out both of our professional teams' first ever home games. 4,868 Spokies, Spokanites, whatever you want to call us around here, watched this game under a blue supermoon. Abby, do you know what a blue supermoon is?
I have absolutely zero lunar expertise. Enlighten me.
Well, thanks to my wife who pointed this out. Let's break it down. Blue supermoon. The blue part means there are 4 full moons in a season. Then they call it, that's where you get to the blue part. The super part is when the moon is closer to the earth than usual. So anybody who went to the game looked up. It was not a full moon, but now I think we are. I think we're going to have a couple nights here where it's going to be basically full. And it's like wild. It looks like it's some Star Wars shit. Anyway, it was super, super cool. And it created a little extra vibes and atmosphere. Not that we needed any. Okay, I'm not going to make this podcast about the vibes of this game. I just can't. We would literally be sitting here for hours gushing. Abby wasn't here. I saw photographic evidence. She watched this thing on her freaking laptop. Come on. So, but I do want to ask, because her best friend was playing in this game. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, go back a couple episodes and listen to my interview with both Abby and Sydney Cummings, her friend, who is the starting center back for Zephyr. Did you pick up on anything from home? Like what were you, and like kind of what were you feeling about the game watching your best friend Sydney play?
Yeah, first things first, I literally texted Sydney as I was watching, saying, I'm just smiling so big to see you in this jersey, see you on the pitch, getting 90 minutes that I know she's worked so hard for. So on a personal note, it was just so amazing to see her out there. Additionally, this is a benchmark for women's football in this country. And that really made my heart happy to be cliche, because there are so many players in this league that have been overlooked, haven't had the chance to play at home. And this is the start of something new and an opportunity for them to play at home. So twofold, I was really happy for my best friend. I was also happy for the game of football in this country. In terms of the actual vibes of the game, I was able to have my audio on and you could hear the excitement through the announcers, which is awesome. I'm sure it was even more electric in person, but I just overall, great experience.
I just want to reinforce something you said, and I know we're going to talk about this topic so many times, but I want to keep saying it every time in case somebody, first of all, it needs to be reinforced, and underlined, and underscored, okay, and shouted out from the rooftops. There are so many players that go through the college ranks and are ready and eager to play the professional game, and they simply don't have an opportunity in this country right now. We don't have time to get into the whole podcast, but Sam Uis interviewed Amanda Vandervoort on her podcast, The Women's Game, and it was a fantastic conversation, even though I think Sam was pretty tough in a way that was not like, it kind of felt a little too like kind of pro NWSL and not pro like player opportunity for me, just the perspective. Again, I don't think that's how she meant to come across, but it felt a little like that, a little gotcha-ish. And I just can't help but I know so closely the backstory that you have told and that Sydney has told on your podcast about the experiences of these young women athletes going overseas and experiencing circumstances that run the gamut from horrible to fantastic and everything in between. And I think there's just such an opportunity for the United States and the USL and the NWSL to just set the standard. And that's what Amanda said on the podcast that stuck out the most to me, which is both the NWSL and the USL can set an economic standard for how women soccer athletes should be treated. So I sense it. I sense the chip on the shoulder. I talked to Amina Ekic about it. I can just tell in that this is what's on their mind. So I just want to reinforce that. I know you and I can talk about that more on the podcast. It'll probably be a little weird for Sydney to speak on it since she's now a player in the USL, but I hope she does. I'm all about player empowerment, whatever. Anyway, I do want to just say March with the Syndicate was unbelievable. I've only gotten to do that twice because I typically get to the stadium and I do some preparation. I write a few notes and I'm there a little bit early, so I don't march with our supporters group called the 509 Syndicate. I just want to shout them out because the energy and time they put into everything that they do is unbelievable. And my favorite thing about doing the march, I've got to do it twice. I did it for the first game for Velocity and now did it for the first game for Zephyr, is that here we are. Abby, we start at this pub called Flat Stick, presenting sponsor of the Spokane Soccer Show. And then we meet at the Rotary Fountain downtown and walk from there to the stadium with drums and chants. And it's really, really cool. It's super special and fun. And without fail, every time you do it, there's like a bunch of locals that'll walk by like, what the hell are you guys doing? And it's like a chance to recruit. So I think it's sick. I just, everything about it was just, it felt super extra. And I'm sure I've heard this from folks in the 509 Syndicate. It just felt very extra. And then at the game, I don't know if you were able to tell, I don't think they had this on the Peacock broadcast, but the USL Spokane group and their president, Katie Harnato, were really active inviting hundreds of girls and young women soccer players to come out onto the field before the singing of the national anthem. And the Gonzaga team was there. I walked in with like dozens of players streaming in. I'm getting immediate goosebumps even again, just thinking about it because it was so special. And my friend Jade and I were there with our cameras and we were everywhere. And it was just like, it felt like such a remarkable moment to try to document what was happening and to try to ultimately tell that story in as many ways and as many times as we can, because it felt that special. Did that convey on the broadcast? They didn't show all the kids. I think it was because they jumped to the starting lineups walking out, I think.
Right. No, I wasn't able to see that as a viewer, but in the post-match interviews, it was brought up that, the visibility side of this, not only do we have the opportunity side for the players, but the visibility is such a trickle-down effect and cyclical going forward. And so that's a major part of this. And I'm so glad that for the home opener, at least, they reinforce that with actionable things. I hope to see that continue throughout the season.
I feel so stoked for those players that they got to experience that. Not just the players that have never played a pro game, of which there were many, but also the pros like Sydney coming back to the United States. I think the coming home tagline that the USL is leaning into is really, really clever because it's accurate. It's coming home. So many of these players in the USL Super League are Americans who, again, it's not my story to tell. And I will continue to prompt Abby and Sydney when I chat with them on this podcast about their experiences playing overseas and how happy they are to come home to their country, regardless of the conditions of your working conditions as professional players overseas, just the opportunity to be playing in your own country.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The buzz of American fans is vastly different than the buzz overseas. I would argue that there is some tactical finesse that might be missing, but the fervor and the energy, there's nothing like it. I hear a lot of anecdotes from, national team players that are coming over to America and playing in our environments, and they rave about the fans and how daunting it is to play there. So to now be on home soil, getting that in support of you, I can only imagine gives the players so much energy, and it's probably super refreshing after long stints overseas.
I'm glad to hear you say that because that's not a perspective I would have ever understood. I mean, it's our grandstand. That thing slaps. We've heard it for Velocity games. We've heard other players and coaches come here and be like, "Oh my god!" And it's sad that you don't see the grandstand on our game coverage.
Right.
We face the bleachers on the east side of the stadium, but our grandstand on the west side is where most of the fans are, and it's they get super, super raucous. One final note I have to make, because this was so insane, Abby. So I put my camera down because they say, and now please remove your hat and we're going to do the national anthem, right? And they introduce head coach of Gonzaga's team Katie Benz is going to do the national anthem. And I'm just kind of like, dude, you just have to just come on, give me a break here. I couldn't help but just go. And my immediate thoughts were, oh, she might just kind of, this is cool. What a great opportunity. But maybe she's just a hobbyist or something as a singer. Oh my God, I'm getting goosebumps again thinking about it. It was like one of the best renditions of the national anthem I've ever heard in my life. I mean, I've been watching sports for my entire life so we're talking, I'm not going to give you a number because, okay, it's several decades. Anyway, it's one of the best. It is like, she crushed it. And I got to get a video of it because I went to the Peacock broadcast mistakenly thinking that they're going to have it. I feel like a jackass that I put my camera down. I should have just been like, dude, I'm media. I'm just going to get this moment because it's way too important. Instead, I don't have it. So I got to talk to the club and get it. It was so beautiful, like stunning voice and like the perfect person in that moment to do something like that. It was so great. Anyway, do you want to talk about the game, Abby Carcio?
I am so ready to talk about this game, Benji.
Okay. First impressions. We're just going to start broad strokes without the specific moments. Just kind of like, what did you think when you watched them start to kick a ball around as a team for the first time, Zephyr FC?
Once I got over the excitement, and you know, the first 5 minutes of any match, regardless of the occasion, is usually a frenzy. So bar that, my first impression was nerves. Like I thought I saw some nerves, and I know I'm not going to be hypercritical on this podcast, of course. However, I'm a realist, and I saw some nerves on both sides, but specifically for the home side.
I'd be lying if I didn't say my very first note is very nervy in the beginning, probably for everyone. Yeah, for me, it was tough to pay close attention because I myself was in the middle of struggling to be a dad to my 2 daughters, a partner to my wife, a brother to my sister, a podcaster for everybody who I kept walking into while I've got a camera, which has created a wall between myself and people that wanted to say hi, and as a fan of soccer all at the same time. Like it was really, really like so nerve-wracking because you just sensed that it just meant so much and you want it to go perfectly. But yeah, that was my first note too, is very nervy, simple mistakes on simple passes. Like, woof. Anyway, any other kind of notes, generally speaking, about what you saw in the game before we get into the key moments?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised to see Zephyr sitting back a little bit in terms of their line of confrontation. I assumed that they would, they have some pace up top, so I would assume they would have pressed a little bit more. But you saw in the first half, their line of confrontation was hovering around the middle of the field. And then even in the second half, you saw them drop even lower to the bottom of the circle. And so that was a surprising one for me. So my initial reaction was a bit of surprise on it.
You know, I forgot. Coach Joe mentioned playing out of a mid-block when she came on the podcast.
She did. Now that you mention it, right. She definitely did.
She did. And can you describe what that means?
Absolutely. So usually teams go off of a 3-block system. So you have a low block, you're sitting in, you're getting hammered, peppered. So you want to condense your formation to try and cover all the gaps. So that hovers around 10 yards, 15 yards max off your 18. That's your line of confrontation. A mid block, you usually sit anywhere from the top of the circle, the middle of the field, or the bottom of the circle. I would call that a mid block. And then a high block is usually in a press. So your 9's going to be nice and high up the pitch on the opposition's 18. So that's how I would define these different blocks.
And for a high block, think Liverpool, gegenpressing, like if Jurgen Klopp, right, made it the most famous probably. A low block, maybe David Moyes in West Ham I'm going to speak to probably the men's side of the game, or Sean Dyche, especially during his days with Burnley.
I can speak to the women's side of the game. Republic of Ireland against these big dominant teams. They usually sit in a mid block and they do quite well keeping the ball out of their net. So that's one that comes to mind for me.
I want to piggyback on your observation. We started with 3 players that when you and I were doing the preview in our midfield, we would have thought all 3 of them would play the same position. By inclination and reputation, Sophie Braun and Taylor Almer. I think it's Almer. I think it's been clarified for me. Definitely play the 6. Holding, maybe both of them a little bit more on the holding side. And then Marley Canales, we didn't know.
No.
But when I asked her how she would define her game, she said she was a 6, more of a 6, right? And I took a note early on in this game, like Marley Canales is a pit bull. It's like, okay, all right, I know your game now. Like, she is aggressive. She likes to put a leg in. She'll go to ground. She's like a tenacious on recoveries. But I just want you to speak really quickly before we get into the key moments of the game of how that may have impacted creativity and attack, having a midfield 3 of 3 relatively 6-ish midfielders in the midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a midfield, having roles and responsibilities is so key. Usually you can identify the pit bull like tackler that's going to put in a good solid fight. That's usually your 6. And then you have more of a creative player, and then you have more of a fit player. So you have these like non-committal roles. And I think having similarly positioned players in a 3 midfield lost a lot of those role definition side of things.
And technically speaking, I want to interject really quickly.
Yeah.
Taylor was slotted as the starting 6, or the pivot, the single pivot. Velocity play a double pivot. On Saturday, Coach Joe Johnson was using a single pivot, and it was Taylor.
For the first half, absolutely. I also found in the second half, it could have been either Canales or Sophie Braun dropping in. It, to me, looked like they had 2 6s at times, especially in the second half when they were dropping in. And so I still
super good point.
I still think there was a lost or there was a misconnection in terms of, listen, who's going to connect the backs to the fronts with creativity?
Yeah, exactly. Because the other note I had of just first impressions, and then we'll get into the key moments from the game, is I didn't see any involvement from one of my players that I shouted out a lot on the previews, and it was Taryn Reese. Did she have 15 touches in the game? I don't remember.
I 100% agree. I felt like they either weren't using her enough, or she was just really quiet. Credit out to Fort Lauderdale. I do think that they showed up defensively for the most part. We can get into the goal in a little bit. Yep. Benji, of course. So it is somewhat to their credit to mark her out of a game. However, I don't think she was involved nearly as much as she needed to be.
And maybe that's a little bit to speaking to this midfield 3 of players that would probably more identify as holding in defensive technique and profile, is where's that outlet going to come from? Let's get into the key moments. All right. The very first good chance in the game was in minute 9. This winger caused Zephyr a lot of problems. Shania Gordon takes the ball from Zephyr on a goal kick rather. I couldn't even see, because I didn't remember this moment in real time. I do remember the save from Izzy Nino, but I don't remember how exactly. And in watching it on Peacock, I couldn't quite tell either. There was a miscue. There was a back pass. It was pretty negative as far as the possession goes for Zephyr in the first half. Shania Gordon goes 1v1, and like, if she has any more finishing class in that moment, it's 1-0, because it was basically a tame save for Nino. Do you remember this moment?
And I actually think this has a lot to do with the nerve comment I made at the beginning. I noticed that every single Zephyr player was under hitting their passes, and usually happens when you're a bit nervy, you don't want to give a hospital ball, but that results in errant back passes that get picked off. And I think you saw that in that moment.
Define hospital ball. That's a good one. Come on, let's go.
A hospital ball is basically, you drill a ball at one of your teammates and you give them a very difficult ball to control in a very heated environment. And so unless your teammate has a really good touch, you're putting them in the hospital because the other team's about to take that ball away from you.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay. So immediately after that, though, we get our first glimpse of Mackenzie Weinert, who really favored these runs down the left channel all game. And I was like, oh my gosh, I saw like, Mackenzie Weinert's really fast. I was like, first note of like something really positive that I noticed from Zephyr was the pace of Mackenzie Weinert.
Benji, pace. That's the first thing I put on my note sheet in my analysis of the game. The thing to highlight here is that we didn't even cover her in our analysis of the squad. Like, she is a late signing.
And no film. I would have wanted to. There might be film, but she got signed after we did our podcast. You're
exactly. Right. And so I was like, who is this kid? Obviously did my background, get signed on a loan. And so it was a very experienced individual, but I really didn't know. And, in this first match, we didn't know who the 9 was going to be. It was a big question mark. And to have her come in, not really training with the team, it was a surprise to me, but a pleasant surprise to see that she has some pace that is threatening.
Got a chance to talk to her after the game. She was surprised as well, but I think it's just a result of, we all know that Alyssa Walker went down with an ACL injury. And Jenny Vetter carried some type of knock. I think she just got a strain of some type, of leg strain that she carried into this game and was listed as questionable going into the game. But I would have theorized, and you and I exchanged some texts about this. I thought that possibly Thais Hayes would have played as a false 9 or maybe just as a center forward flat out. But nope, they went with Mackenzie Weiner. And Joe Johnson's, I would say, arguably her best decision, because my goodness, Mackenzie was fantastic. But more notes on her in a moment. Abby, I have a question for you. You already told us what a hospital ball is. You have a podcast with our friend Sydney Cummings. It's called Megged. Why is it called that?
So, are you asking why the podcast is called that, or what the origins of nutmegged is?
You tell me why. What does it mean to be megged?
Okay, so a nutmeg is when the ball is passed between your legs, and you are embarrassed to the nth degree. And I'll give you a little origin story of this, because I am a historian and I actually did know this beforehand.
Let's go.
In the 1870s, this is when the nutmeg story starts. It was actually a word coined during the English-American nutmeg trade, the actual nutmeg, the spice, when Americans would falsely fill up their crates with wood pieces that actually resembled nutmegs. It was to trick the English in a embarrassing way. And so that is where the term nutmeg comes from, to trick in an embarrassingly or an obviously embarrassing way. And so that perfectly encapsulates what an actual soccer nutmeg is. When you get it passed between your legs, you feel very exposed and dumbfounded, let's put it that way. So that's the origin story. And then with Meg specifically, between Sydney and I am a prolific megger. I love to do it. It makes me feel so good inside, this warm, fuzzy feeling. And it was a joke between the two of us, because in college I was restricted from doing it because I would oftentimes do it in places on the pitch that a coach would go crazy for. So that is the origin.
And what was your coach's name one more time?
Pia McNeil. Shout out to the legend who restricted me on nutmegs throughout my entire Brown career. Probably the best thing she ever did for me.
I love this so much. I love that you have the research on this. It came up in 509 Syndicate chatter on Discord over the weekend. There were some folks that I think thought it might have some meaning with testicles, like nutmeg. So should we call it something else in the women's game? And I thought that was funny, because I was pretty sure it had something to do with the spice trade. And I actually found that book that was written called The Language and Folklore of the World's Greatest Game. Shout out Alex from the 509 Syndicate from finding the exact quote. Nutmegs were such a valuable commodity that unscrupulous exporters were to pull a fast one by mixing a helping of wooden replicas into the sacks being shipped to England, and being nutmegged soon came to imply stupidity on the part of the duped and cleverness on the part of the trickster. So great. Anyway, okay. So the reason that we bring up this term is because I got a text early in the game from my friend of the pod, Mike Policio. Shout out, Mike. And he said, Ekic is going to destroy this league. You can tell from the moment she touches the ball, she is electric. So that brings us to minute 16 of this game. The aforementioned Mackenzie Weiner comes back to a deep position, receives the ball between the lines from Sarah Clark. That matters because Fort Lauderdale were pushed high and they were kind of cheating a little bit. Kenzie spots a run down the channel from Amina Ekic on the right. And it's really, the part of this I thought was kind of funny is initially Amina Ekic kind of misplays it, I would say. She doesn't want to take a first touch with her not favored right foot. So instead, she just kind of lets the ball come to a rest so that she can go to work 1v1. And after that, I have to ask you, because you have knowledge of this player, what happens after the ball comes to a rest and Amina Ekic goes to work out on the right flank?
So my former teammate at Brown University, Cheyenne Allen, we were in the same warm-up line for our time together. unfortunately falls victim to a nutmeg. And I think it is fair to call out Kia McNeil as the person to blame for this goal. And hear me out, Benji and Kia.
I hope Kia's listening.
If I was allowed to nutmeg throughout my Brown career, perhaps Cheyenne Allen would be used to me nutmegging her, and she would then therefore avoid the instance in this match. She would have not been nutmegged, therefore not had to make a foul in an improper area on the pitch, giving them a PK. So I just want to go, I don't necessarily blame Cheyenne. I really do go back to Kia McNeil.
Oh my God. Shots fired. I love that Kia McNeil is catching strays from this podcast. This is unbelievable. And my favorite part of it is, what is the tagline for your podcast called Megged?
It is called Moved Your Feet. This is Megged.
All right, Cheyenne, you did not move your feet. And my favorite thing about Cheyenne in this moment, though, she just quite literally stands up and walks to the top of the 18. Like, I'm just going to wait. Like that was a PK. She doesn't even look at the ref to like complain, because she bodied Amina. Didn't really have a choice. It's like, Amina's going to go 1v1 with your keeper. So, take your chances. Anyway. Fantastic.
And I do want to say, Cheyenne Allen is one of the best kids I've ever met. Her energy, she'll be a leader on that team. Just got nipped by the nutmeg bug for this match, but really is an amazing player and an amazing kid.
Shout out Cheyenne. What happens next? Talk us through the PK.
Yeah, so Ekich comes up to take the PK. Sometimes teams don't like the player that got fouled to be taking the PK, simply because there could be a ruffled emotion. They could have a little knock. So I was a bit surprised to see that. But the other thing that surprised me was her run up. She started so far back and then had a little stutter step in there. So I was just,
she did a little Jorginho. Yeah,
she did. And that is the flavor that she's going to bring to this league and to this team specifically. And I absolutely love it.
I'm absolutely here for it too. She's our flair player. I think we could kind of tell that from the preview podcast. So I'll come back to Mike Policio's text. Ekich is going to destroy this league. You can tell from the first moment she touches the ball, which was I definitely saw what I saw today as well. Back to the game, there was another clear chance for center forward Gianna Gorley of Fort Lauderdale in minute 20. She receives the ball from midfield, cuts in on her left foot, sends the shot wide over the bar. I will say, though, she was given way too much room to work. Like, there's got to be a little more. I always say, put a foot in someone's ass. Like, make yourself known as a center back. Put someone on the ground. Risk a yellow just to at least you can't let a player get that kind of room. Eesh.
And what's to notice here, Benji, is just the next play, really, after the PK goal was almost a clear chance for Fort Lauderdale. And I think we always say big five moments. We need to lock in on big five moments. And this is one of those things. I think that shows a little bit of newness from the team, maybe not a lack of experience, but a lack of cohesiveness or leadership out there to be like, listen, guys, we need to reset, lock in. We can't let them jump down our throats in the next 5 minutes. That's the one note I saw from that.
It's such a good point. Anytime you're watching this game, the sport of soccer, after a team concedes, they're pissed, they're motivated, and sometimes they're running just that little bit quicker and they're playing a little more aggressive. They're looking to break the lines. So it was one of those moments, but luckily it went over the ball or went over the goal. 40th minute, we see Kenzie's pace once more. She receives the ball from Izzy Nino down the left channel. Fort Lauderdale was playing a high line. Their center back, Celia Gaynor, she attempts to win a 50-50 and leaves her feet, but misses the ball completely. Just a moment of kind of like poor technique, a little inexperience, maybe just got a little bit hasty. Kenzie says like, thank you very much. She stays on the ground and then ends up just like bombing down the field. And even with the ball, she outpaced Gaynor, who was trying to like recover. But unfortunately for Kenzie, she was going 1v3. It was still just one of those moments where I was like, okay, Kenzie, lots of pace. Again, like this is something that they can work with for sure.
Absolutely. And what I notice here, Benji, obviously the pace, but you just said it's a direct ball from Nino. That's your goalkeeper. And that was a theme throughout the match. Like, we were finding balls from Clark into our 9. We were also finding balls from Katie Murray up into the likes of Reese. So I do see a bit of directness. While it did create opportunities, I'm curious how that will transcend into the next match.
We talk about direct and we use it as a bad word sometimes, but it's just a choice. It's just a tool. You don't probably want to do that all the time, but sometimes being direct is really, really helpful. You don't win games with players like, let's say, Trinity Rodman without being direct sometimes.
100%.
Okay, Abby, around minute 48, 49, somewhere in that time frame, some really nice stuff starts to take shape with this attack of Zephyr FC. Can you point out a couple moments that you remember?
Yes, so we do see directness in this play, but in the best form. And we also see Ekic. We've seen her ability on the ball, but we also see what her movement can do off of the ball. And so in this play, Ekic actually tucks into more of a pocket 9 in that space between the back line and their 6. Cummings finds that entry ball into her feet. She's able to pivot, play it off to Almer, who then slips one in for Wider, who's unfortunately offsides. But that's some great combination play that is, yes, direct, but it also lends itself to the chemistry between Almer and Weiner that we are going to see in the future, I believe, and then also the off-the-ball movement of Ekic tucking in. So that was a great combination play for me.
I think a kind of similar moment happens in minute 50. I made an observation about Taylor Almer when we were doing our preview podcast that she loves the ball played quickly to her feet so she can take the half turn. And then she has shown in her college film very good vision to quickly identify runners or space, or to be able to break some lines with some passes. So she receives the ball from Sarah Clark, immediately spots a run by Kenzie Weiner, who splits the 2 center backs and then ends up taking a shot, unfortunately from kind of a tough angle. So she goes near post and sends it into the side netting. But it was like what you were describing, and then this moment that happened like a minute later are 2 moments where I was like, okay, this is something to build on. And the thing that I'm noticing about a lot of these plays, though, is it's repeatedly Kenzie Weiner and Amina Ekic are showing some flashes. So I think there's a lot of production that they can get out of those 2 players. This episode of the Spokane Soccer Show is brought to you by Feast World Kitchen. If you know, you know. If you don't know, I'm about to tell you. Think authentic, mouth-watering cuisine from all over the world delivered to your mouth right here in downtown Spokane. Here's the part you might not have known. Feast is a nonprofit that effectively creates chef entrepreneurs by offering a bunch of programs where immigrants and former refugees learn career skills, earn income from their food sales, and build connections in the community. Quick sidebar, I still have daydreams about the beef sambusas and the spicy jollof rice that we had during the AFCON watch party in January. But don't take my word for it. Head down to Feast World Kitchen on 3rd Avenue, follow them on Instagram, or go to their website at feastworldkitchen.org. So it was minute 72 that Fort Lauderdale equalizes. Do you want to tell us what you saw in that moment? I have thoughts on it too, but I want to hear from you first, Abby.
First things first, we talked about Big 5 moments. There's also something to be said after substitutes come on. It's either going in one direction or the other. This is unfortunately 1 minute after that sub was made. And so this goal, and we have to talk about the decision to play Katie Murray at left back, Benji. We have to talk about it.
Yep.
Because we were both surprised by this. I actually thought she had the most offensive production out of the entire back line. She did great on that side, but a difficulty with that is that sometimes you take risks and you get stripped and you're not on the position on the pitch that you want to get stripped at. And so that one went against her. So in this situation, Murray was getting stripped. She was a bit higher up on the pitch. Substitute Vigiano is the one that drops down. Unfortunately, she gets beat on the wing, forcing a second defender to come over in Clark. That leaves a gap between Clark and Cummings, who is late to cover on the dashing run of McCain, who slots it home. So it was definitely a defensive breakdown, something that needs to be talked about. Second defenders and how you slide over off of that. But it is something to highlight 1 minute after a substitution on that same side. Unfortunate, but it's a learning curve for sure.
This is where like Katie Murray's roots as a midfielder and as a kind of we identified her as having some flair as a college soccer player. She really likes to attack. She's very aggressive. She has exceptional work rate, but her midfielder roots kind of came out in this moment. She had the play of like a winger where, depending on your coaching philosophy, it's like you allow your wingers to try to beat one defender. If they try to beat more than one, some coaches will get frustrated. I mean, she had 3 defenders surrounding her, and she tried to beat the same defender like twice. And it just felt like one of those, you got to play it a little bit safe. But credit to Fort Lauderdale for the shape of their press. They had 4 players back there that were pressing her that led to the strip. And especially true for a fullback, that if you try to beat too many players, you might get your pocket picked. And that's what happened to poor Katie Murray on that play.
And you know what? That's a learning curve for her. Obviously a new position. It was a risk in playing her there. But she'll take that into the next game, and hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Minute 84, one of the most exciting moments of the game, that is like the moment that almost was. So you mentioned Natalie Vigiano, who came on as a sub, like for like replacement with Taryn Reese. She spotted another one of these runs and just played the ball into space, weighted pass, and was like, I think these players already know the profile of Weinert to just be like, just throw the ball over into the left side. She's going to get it. Well, that's exactly what happens. Weinert has no trouble getting in behind the center backs, picks up the ball, and just, dude, she beat this center back, Gainer, earlier in the game on that run that we talked about, and you could just tell she felt like she could cook Gainer, and she does. She creates some space for a cross, identifies Sophie Braun at the back post. Unfortunately for Sophie Braun, she gets such clean contact, but it just goes right into the side netting. I mean, it's probably like a foot off from going into the goal, and she actually kind of trips forward after sending the header into the side netting and couldn't tell what happened immediately. And like, I think half the stadium thought it was in. The classic side netting where you're like, did that go in? Oh, so close.
Yes, this was a scream moment. I was actually in the dining hall of our university when I was watching this, and this was a vocal moment for me, because it's one of those that almost would have been a perfect way to close your home opener. But again, those are the fine margins that are going to count in this league. Especially you look at the results of the other games, it's always going to be close. And so those are things we need to tighten up. Defensively, we just talked about, and here offensively, again, fine margins will bite you in the butt.
And just another moment of not just like pace in this particular example from Kenzie Weinert, it was like invention too. She's just so clever with her, it wasn't quite a Cruyff, but it was just, she just rolled the ball onto her right foot or back onto her left foot, rather, her favored foot, and like a really well placed cross, like just so close to being an amazing moment. Overall performances, anybody you want to big up that we haven't yet, or just want to put a fine point on some of the play that we saw from any of these players, Abby?
Yeah, of course. For me, for Zephyr, player of the match was Ekic. Her creativity showed through. Out of the attacking players, I thought she was the most threatening. Even though Weinert had a lot of pace, I actually thought Ekic gave the most problems for Fort Lauderdale's back line. But I also want to highlight Katie Murray, because although she was involved in the strip that led to the goal, I do actually think she played quite well. I do, again, want to mention she was influential on the attack, even from that reserve position. And so I just wanted to highlight her as a player to look out for if she continues in that role.
Just her work rate. She's one of the players that I know we both noted when watching film and doing the previews of like, wow, that player works so hard. And you totally saw it in this game. So it's very early for all of this. Every team in the league will need 5 to 6 games minimally to just start to build a foundational early identity. My only other note, that other than I agree about Amina, of course, and Kenzie Weinert, I was disappointed not to see Taryn Reese involved. Something, whether it's communication or it's unlocking those wingers from the midfield and finding somebody in that, if it's going to be a 6-8-8 or a 6-8-10, like somebody has to be able to pull strings and connect the lines in that midfield three. And I think you and I both observed that didn't really happen. They only created 5 chances in the whole game. Nobody had more than 1. Okay. Sydney and Izzy both had a created chance. Taylor, McKenzie, and Marley were the other 3 players with created chances. That's just not what you want to see. You want to see more than 5 created chances for sure.
I think one note that Fort Lauderdale had over Zephyr is their bravery in the final third. Like it's a word that's used a lot, and it's never defined clearly. However, that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. They were brave. They were taking shots from 40 yards out, which is a low percentage shot. However, it does show that they want to attack. They want to score goals. And I think we played it a little safe in this match offensively.
Fort Lauderdale did have 9 chances created, led by by Shania Gordon with 3. We had 5 shots, only 1 on target, to Fort Lauderdale's 9 and 3 on target. I can't see XG. I can't see any of that stuff yet. I hope, folks, that I'll be able to get better stats. Foot Mob, America Soccer Analysis. We'll see. Sarah and Sydney led the team in passing with 70 and 60 passes respectively. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not a particularly high number. Leveni Vaca and Celia Gaynor, meanwhile, for Fort Lauderdale, led their team with 88 and 85 passes. Stats are going to be weird for a while, so I'm just going to leave it at that. The production, watching it on Peacock. I know you've probably not watched a lot of USL games on any of these streaming platforms, Abby, but I'll just tell you, it was cool because the production elements, including halftime interviews and post-game interviews. In this game, the halftime interview was with Amina Ekic, and the post-game was with the player from the winning team, Addie McCain, who scored their goal. And those interviews were so fun.
Yeah, that's an element that's engaging the consumer, and that's what we need. And I go back to this time and time again. This is an entertainment platform. You need to have these bells and whistles to draw people in. I want to mention here, when I was watching one of the other games, I think it was DC Power's game, it almost looked like they were operating on a one camera system. It definitely had a different production value than Zephyr's game. So I just want to draw attention to that. And then additionally, having all of these games streamed on Peacock is so crucial. Even in the NWSL, when you have different streaming platforms, it's difficult to find games. To have one central place to go to for all USL fans is an amazing start for this league.
I saw that comment a lot, and I'm really glad people are pointing it out. The value of having one streaming platform is awesome. Huge disparity in the quality of video between the streams that I saw. I'll just tell you right now, the Carolina game had by far the most superior looking stream. The worst was the Tampa Bay game. It was a day game, and I think the Zephyr game suffered the same thing. In high contrast sunny conditions, the transport stream, which is Peacock in this instance, or it's ESPN Plus on for Velocity games, is, I mean, just quite honestly, it's pitiful. Like, there were moments on corner kicks in the Tampa Bay game that I couldn't even see. The players are just might as well have overlapped because there was so little definition between them, because there's just not enough dynamic range, not to get all technical, but it looked like crap. It looked washed out. I think our game looked really washed out, and I was really disappointed by that until the lights came on. Once the lights came on, the cameras for both the Tampa Bay game and the Zephyr game could handle the dynamic range of that, because it's a little simpler, it's a little flatter visual image, and it looked really great. Be patient on that. I know that stuff's all going to improve over time, but I just also want to shout out about these interviews. Pure class by former Kansas City current midfielder Addie McCain, shouting out Spokane's fans and the atmosphere. There's just a vibe. I said this on Discord the other day to the 509 Syndicate folks. Like, I feel first and foremost like a USL Super League supporter right now. And then it's like, yeah, my team is Zephyr FC, but just there's like, these teams are competing and they want to win. These are all competitive athletes. But there's also just a little bit of an energy that I sense of like, let's make this league kick ass. And I really liked the feeling of that.
There's this ingrained collective desire for this thing to work. This league, like we've mentioned, is so crucial to the elevation of women's sport. And so, yes, on the pitch, iron sharpens iron. Everyone's going to put their best performance in. But holistically, the success of things like consumerism, fans coming to stadium, that is a win for every single player in this league. And so we would be fools not to champion one another in that respect off the pitch. On the pitch, of course, we're going to battle. We're going to put a good product on the pitch. But off of it, there's this collective ethos that's really apparent.
It's awesome. It's palpable. It's measurable even. I mean, I don't see these types of interactions in League One games that I've watched, or frankly, any men's leagues that I'm watching these days. Both the players and all the players that I've heard from when I've talked to them before Saturday's game are super thoughtful and well-spoken too. That's the other thing. Some of these players have never played professionally. They haven't had a lot of media training. They've never maybe been interviewed for something like this, some of these players. And they do indeed, I feel like, make many of the men's players sound like monosyllabic dum-dums by comparison. Like, I just thought they were also well-spoken, the players that I've talked to so far. I will end with just asking you a few questions about the Super League. Did you get a chance to watch any other highlights from any other games? Anything? And if you didn't, I totally understand. This podcast is going to go a little bit long, folks. So, did you watch any of those other games?
I wouldn't be a soccer junkie if my free time during my preseason wasn't filled with the Arsenal game versus Washington Spirit and also the highlights from the other two fixtures in the USL Super League. So I was able to watch things to note from those matches: set piece goals. All three of them set piece goals.
All by center backs.
Love to see it.
It was the war of the center backs. Unbelievable.
So is that a lack of bravery on the attack, or is that just some offensive production coming from the back lines?
I think we saw a lot of what's called negative play. Negative probably doesn't mean you think it means. Negative is just a tactic. You're just playing a little bit, you're safe. You're like, okay, we're going to do a lot of back passing. Think Gareth Southgate at the Euros.
That's a good one.
That's what it looks like to play negative. Hey, think of the U.S. women's national team a few times. Let's be honest. I mean,
absolutely.
But 3 games, 3 sold out stadiums. Abby, criminy. Let's go. I'm getting hyped. I got to chill.
I also am getting so hyped, Benji, because this is what I'm talking about. You need the marketing team to be burning on both ends of the sticks, because butts and seats make this thing turn. Obviously, you're going to put a good product on the pitch. However, if no one is watching, you don't have an improvement or a tick in the needle in the forward direction. And so it's so amazing to see that they've all sold out their home openers. I would love to see this continue. It's going to be big ups on the marketing team and the fans to show up.
May that continue. For what it's worth, I've got some data for you. Carolina Ascent play in the same stadium as Charlotte Independence. It's called the American Legion Memorial. It seats 10,500 people, and they just sold it out. Charlotte Independence had 1,200 players show up when we recently went there, and they've never sold out their stadium. The Independence, the League One men's team. So take note of that. That's amazing. As Abby described, it was center back scoring goals all over the place. I won't get into the notes from those other 2 games, but I did watch the highlights from them and thought it was really exciting. In future episodes, we'll probably do some breakdowns of some of those other games that don't involve Zephyr FC. But for the sake of saving time, just go watch them, folks. Get on YouTube. USL does a good job of providing a 6-minute timeline on YouTube so you can see all the moments and take notes of some of the players. But yeah, all 3 of those goals were scored by center backs in the other 2 games. There are only 8 teams, so there's only 4 games per week. If you wanted to be a completionist and watch all the Super League games, it actually wouldn't be particularly difficult. With that, I want to wrap this up. That's it for today's show. Thank you to my co-host of this podcast, Abby Carcio. Appreciate you, Abby. The next game on the show's radar, it's going to be a minute for professional soccer in Spokane. Sunday, August 25th, though, Gonzaga women host Kansas State, 12 p.m. at Luger Field. I'm going to be there. I'm going to cover that game. I can't wait. I'm super hyped. Let's go out and support Coach Benz and those players. There's a huge game for Velocity FC on Wednesday, September 4th. We're hosting Union Omaha. I don't like Union Omaha. I'm just going to say that right now. You heard me. Back to school night is the theme. It's going to be a nationally televised game on the CBS Sports Network, so make sure you watch that one. Then a few days later, Velocity also play at One Stadium on September 7th, 6 p.m., hosting Central Valley Fuego. And if that week didn't have enough soccer, Abby, the game that I'm really, really excited to see, come on, we host our second Zephyr FC game the next day, Sunday, September 8th, 6 p.m., where we will be hosting Brooklyn FC. So much soccer.
So much soccer. I can't wait. I will be chomping at the bit to watch that match, especially now Joe Johnson has some film on some teams to look at. So we should see a few fewer set piece goals going forward.
Stay tuned for lots of content. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/Spokane Soccer Show. Please rate and review the podcast on Spotify and Apple. And as always, thank you for listening.